Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.
So on today's episode of Vegas Hockey Hub with your host Ian Rachiele, we are going to be looking back at a trade that is going to be remembered forever, but not for the reason the Vegas Golden Knights are probably thinking of back in 2018. And it's going to be a really interesting episode to kind of sit back and analyze and take a retrospective about arguably the worst trade in Vegas Golden Knights history. And we're going to be talking about the Max Pacioretty trade here on Vegas Hockey Hub with your host, Ian Rachiele. Now, go to prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. Check out all the amazing content we have on the network. We have about over a dozen shows on the platform, including Vegas Hockey Hub, so check that out. Also, go to our social media pages at Vegas Hockey Hub. We're on all major platforms. If you want to follow me, I am right down there as well at Ian J. Rachiele on all major platforms. And really, to kick this off, we have to look back. We have to kind of do a hindsight retrospective, if you will, because I want to take you back to 2018, okay? Because to really establish this story and actually explain it correctly, we actually have to go into the mindset of what was going on at the time. You really have to kind of take a look at what George McPhee, Kelly McCrimmon, and the Vegas Golden Knights were at this point. Now, here's the perspective of your Vegas Golden Knights. You just lost in the Stanley Cup Finals, okay? You were just a few games away from hoisting this Lord Stanley Cup. So, when you're a few games away, you lose James Neal, he'll be going off to free agency, okay? But majority of your team is intact. William Karlsson just had a 43-goal season. You had Jonathan Marchessault, who was a rising star with the Golden Knights, someone who had just gotten signed and was given a nice contract extension by George McPhee earlier a couple of months prior. And then Riley Smith, who they acquired from the Florida Panthers, his contract was already set and sound. However, the one aspect that your Vegas Golden Knights did not have in 2018, okay, back during the offseason of 2018, there is one part that the Vegas Golden Knights are truly missing. They were missing a captain-like approach. They were missing someone who not only would think like a captain, but more importantly, they were missing somebody who had playoff pedigree. They were missing someone who had a bunch of experience. And more importantly, with this roster, you had the misfit line. We already knew that. But what you didn't have in 2018 during that Stanley Cup final is you did not have a elite scorer who was going to score a lot more on the top six. In other words, back in 2018, during the Stanley Cup final, you had William Karlsson, you had Marchessault, you had two guys who were on the rise, but you didn't have an established scorer. You didn't have someone who had been doing it for years and years and years. So the Vegas Golden Knights during the 2018 offseason were going out and looking to acquire exactly that. They were looking to acquire a established scorer. Now, they did manage to get two in this offseason, by the way, because during the 2018 offseason, the Vegas Golden Knights did acquire veteran Paul Stastny. He was a former Colorado Avalanche, former Winnipeg Jet, former St. Louis Blue. This was somebody who had been in the NHL for a lot of years at that point, and they brought him in to help with the top six. But Max Pacioretty, just because he was the captain of the Montreal Canadiens, but more importantly, this was someone in Max Pacioretty that was being sold on a high mark up to that point. Now, remember that Max Pacioretty had gone off a 4-season streak, okay, where he had 60 points in 2014, 67 points in 2015, 64 points in 2016, and 67 points in 2017. There's also the same Max Pacioretty that if we're looking at the mindset that they had in 2018, he had rarely missed any games up to that point. In fact, during those 4 seasons that I mentioned, the most that he had ever missed up to that point was 9 games. That was in 2014. So if you take the retrospective, which we'll get to in a second, but if you're looking at the present mind of your Vegas Golden Knights, if you really study what George McPhee, Kelly McCrimmon, and Bill Foley were looking at during that 2018 offseason, they saw a captain for the Montreal Canadiens who had hit the 30-goal mark 5 times with the Montreal Canadiens. It's also the same guy who hit 60 points with the Montreal Canadiens 5 times. So, if you were going to acquire somebody who was only 30 years old at that point, okay, he was either 29 or 30, it was around that range. It seemed like a safe bet because you had someone, the Montreal Canadiens were starting to sell off. They were starting to kind of turn over the roster a bit based off of a very disappointing season prior in 2017-2018. So if the Montreal Canadiens are going to give up a captain in Max Pacioretty, a guy who is a 30-goal scorer 5 times, and someone who is a 60-point scorer 5 times in his career, it made a lot of sense when you see what was in 2018. Now, the first part of this negotiation, and the thing that stings the Vegas Golden Knights the most, is what they gave up in the deal. Now, originally, the idea was them giving up their top prospect in the trade. The idea from George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon is that your Vegas Golden Knights during 2018, during the offseason, Montreal Canadiens giving up Max Pacioretty, you were going to give up your top prospect. Now, it is debated if that was Eric Brandstrom or if it was Cody Glass. Now, there were some rumors and speculation that it was Cody Glass who was originally asked for by the Montreal Canadiens. However, there's also stuff that came out that Eric Brandstrom was also on there. Because depending on what website you used, or whether it was NHL.com, regardless if it was certain websites like Sinbin, like there were different people that were ranked as the top prospect with the Vegas Golden Knights. But the one person that was not mentioned originally was Nick Suzuki. Now, the one part of this trade that absolutely hurts Vegas Golden Knights fans is that you could have had Nick Suzuki. You could have kept Nick Suzuki because George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon deemed their top prospect an untradeable asset. Once again, you could be Brandstrom or you could be Glass. For this argument's sake, let's use Cody Glass because he was the 6th overall pick. He was the first draft pick in history. And it's a bit ironic considering what he's doing now in Nashville on the bottom 6. However, in 2018, they didn't want to give up Cody Glass, so instead, they gave up their number 2 prospect in the organization in Nick Suzuki. Also in the deal, they gave up Thomas Tatar. Why does Thomas Tatar matter, by the way? Because you gave up a first, a second, and a third just 4 months prior. At the 2018 NHL trade deadline, the Detroit Red Wings, who were selling off assets at an alarming rate, traded away Thomas Tatar to your Vegas Golden Knights because the Vegas Golden Knights were trying to win a Stanley Cup, so they bought in for Thomas Tatar. The issue with Thomas Tatar is that he only played 20 games with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. He was a healthy scratch during the 2018 Stanley Cup playoffs. That run that they had, Thomas Tatar was not part of it. And more importantly, they would trade Thomas Tatar 4 months after being acquired to get Max Pacioretty. Now, I'm not going to go Steve Dangle. I'm not going to do a trade tree here. But if you actually want to sit here and analyze it, the Vegas Golden Knights essentially traded away Nick Suzuki, a 2018 first-round pick, a 2019 second-round pick, and a 2021 third-round pick, plus their own 2018 second-round pick. just to get Max Pacioretty. Because if anybody's ever seen those trade tree videos, you essentially traded away 3 draft picks to get Thomas Tatar, and then you flip Thomas Tatar to get Max Pacioretty. So in the span of 4 months, the Vegas Golden Knights traded away 4 high draft picks and then traded away Nick Suzuki on top of it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and spoil the entire trade, but here's what I will tell you. Max Pacioretty's tenure with the Vegas Golden Knights is what we're going to start out with. And with Max Pacioretty, he would sign a 4-year, $28 million contract extension almost immediately after being traded to the Vegas Golden Knights. Consider it a sign and trade, if you will. So Max Pacioretty signs a $7 million contract to come to Vegas after being traded from Montreal. Now, how did Max Pacioretty do in those 4 seasons that he played in Vegas? Well, Max Pacioretty in year 1, 2018-2019, he played in 66 games, had 22 goals for 40 points. Okay, that is not bad, right? That's probably what you're thinking to yourself. That is not terrible for Max Pacioretty. A 22-goal season, 40 points. However, it is bad when you consider what he had done previously. You have to look at it from a certain perspective and realize that it was actually one of his worst performing seasons up to his point in the NHL. Keep in mind, he had a 35-goal season back in 2016-2017. His first season in Vegas, he only has 22 goals. He had a 67-point season in 2016-2017 with the Montreal Canadiens. He comes to Vegas and only has 40 points during that time. That's a 27-point drop-off. However, your Vegas Golden Knights would go to the playoffs, and Max Pacioretty actually would provide value in the playoffs. As during the San Jose Sharks in 2019, he would have 5 goals and 11 points in 7 games. So Max Pacioretty actually helped the Vegas Golden Knights try to beat San Jose in 2019. So, okay, that's season 1. Season 1, you essentially had 51 points if you do regular season and playoffs combined. 51 points with 27 being goals. Okay, how did year 2 go? All right, 2019-2020, his second season playing with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. How would he perform in Vegas? Well, this actually would be the best season of his entire tenure in Vegas. As not only would he be named an All-Star during the 2020 NHL All-Star Game, his one and only All-Star Game appearance in his entire career, shockingly, but in 71 games, he had 32 goals and 66 points, along with 44 penalty minutes, and helped the Vegas Golden Knights reach the Western Conference Finals. Okay? This was during the bubble of the 2020 Stanley Cup playoffs. Keep that in mind. So year 2, Max Pacioretty looked like he actually was earning his value, right? Year 2 seemed like we actually were getting the best of this deal, because a lot of times in hockey, whoever acquires the best player normally gets the better end of the deal. So in 2020, 2 years after this trade, if I had gone up to Golden Knights fans and asked who actually won this deal between Montreal and Vegas, you would have said Max Pacioretty, due to him being an all-star and having a 66-point performance with the Vegas Golden Knights. Also, I want to mention he actually averaged half a point per game during the Stanley Cup playoffs that year, as during the bubble, he had 5 goals and 8 points in 16 playoff games. This was that 2020 Stanley Cup playoffs where your Vegas Golden Knights lost to the Dallas Stars. But 2020, 2021 would actually be the last of good value you would get from Max Pacioretty. As season 3, he would play in 48 of 56 games that year. He would have 24 goals. So once again, back under the 30-goal mark. 51 points on the season, which once again wasn't bad, But considering that he had 66 points prior, that is a 15-point decrease with Max Pacioretty. During the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs, Max Pacioretty would play in about a dozen games, have 5 goals and 11 points during the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs. Who they lost to in the Stanley Cup playoffs, I will mention that at the end because it's very fitting. His last season playing in Vegas, 2021-2022, Max Pacioretty, his 4th and final season suiting up for your Vegas Golden Knights. This would be the worst performing season since his final year in Montreal, as he would miss over half the season, played in only 39 games, racked up only 19 goals on the season, not even hitting the 20-goal mark, and had less than 40 points on the season. That was a low for Max Pacioretty. And they was considering they didn't make the playoffs that year, they actually didn't get the playoff experience from Max Pacioretty. And we'll answer that question in just a little bit, don't worry. So that was Max Pacioretty's run, okay? That was the 4 seasons that he played with the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, keep this in mind. He was a one-time All-Star with the Vegas Golden Knights. I want you to remember that, okay? One-time All-Star. But during his 4 seasons playing in Vegas, Max Pacioretty played in 224 games. He had 97 goals, 194 points, and racked up 127 penalty minutes with the Vegas Golden Knights. It's also the same Max Pacioretty who actually received Lady Byng trophy votes during 2 of those seasons that he played with the Vegas Golden Knights. So that is the Max Pacioretty side of it, okay? That part is done. But just remember, 224 games played, 97 goals, and 194 points as a Vegas Golden Knight. Well, what ended up going on with the Montreal Canadiens side of the deal? Well, I'm going to get over the draft pick very quickly because, funny enough, this draft pick had a very interesting history to it. So that second-round pick, they traded from Vegas to Montreal to acquire Max Pacioretty. It got moved around a bit with the Vegas Golden Knights, as this second-round pick was originally the Columbus Blue Jackets. They gave up to the Vegas Golden Knights during the 2017 NHL expansion draft. Vegas would then give it up to Montreal for Max Pacioretty, and then on draft night, the Montreal Canadiens would flip this pick and would give it to the Los Angeles Kings as the LA Kings traded up and wanted to get back into the second round. So they gave up a 3rd and a 4th round pick to the Montreal Canadiens to move up. Now, that draft pick does not matter because it was not taken by Montreal. However, the 2 draft picks that were taken, the first one was defenseman Matthias Norlander, and he's actually playing in the AHL right now with the Montreal Canadiens. He's only played a cup of coffee with the Canadiens organization at this point in time. And that draft pick the Montreal Canadiens also got was taken for a defenseman in Jacob Laguerriere. And him playing in the OHL, this guy so far, unfortunately, has not made it to the NHL. As Jacob Laguerriere, he is someone who is actually with the Montreal Canadiens organization, came from Canada, and at this moment in time, his career, he was playing for the Indy Fuel of the ECHL. He actually played 45 games and had 15 points as of the most recent stats. So, for the Montreal Canadiens, you get 2 draft picks with this situation, but none of them have made it to the NHL. But what about Thomas Tatar? Okay? What about Thomas Tatar, the guy the Vegas Golden Knights gave up 3 draft picks for, who they put in this deal? Well, Thomas Tatar would provide his value immediately with the Montreal Canadiens, as in 3 seasons playing in Montreal, he would play in 80 games in year 1, have 25 goals and 58 points in that single season. Now, keep this in mind. In year one, Max Pacioretty only had 40 points for Vegas. Thomas Tatar had 58 in that same season. Year two, that Thomas Tatar was playing in Montreal, 2019-2020. Thomas Tatar had 22 goals and 61 points with the Montreal Canadiens. Max Pacioretty that season actually outbeat him with 66 points, but still, that's very close. And then the last season that he played in Montreal, in the 2020-2021 shortened season, he would play in 50 out of 56 games, only rack up 10 points and 10 goals and 30 points. That season, Max Pacioretty actually had a way better season as he had 51 points that year. However, Thomas Tatar, during that 2021 Stanley Cup Finals, would actually register only 1 point with the Canadiens. So, at face value with Thomas Tatar, he had an excellent year one, he had a solid year two, and then a very disappointing year three with the Montreal Canadiens. Now, what happened to Thomas Tatar after his tenure in Montreal? Well, he would play 2 seasons in New Jersey and actually registered a 20-goal season in his final year in New Jersey, helped them make it to the Stanley Cup playoffs and even get to the second round in 2023. And then this most recent season, Thomas Tatar would play in Colorado, and he would actually have 1 goal and 9 points in 27 games. So for Thomas Tatar, he had a solid 2 years in Montreal, and then the rest of his career, he's kind of been a middle six forward with the Montreal Canadiens. But I've left this one guy for last. And I've left him for last for an important reason. Because this guy is the reason why Vegas lost his trade. Now, if you already know who it is, you're shaking your head. If you don't know who it is, by the end of the next 8 minutes, you're going to be shaking your head. Because the Vegas Golden Knights gave up a top prospect, a guy they drafted 15th overall, and that was Nick Suzuki. So Nick Suzuki, who was one of the 3 first-round picks the Vegas Golden Knights acquired during the 2017 NHL entry draft. This was a Vegas Golden Knights team that Nick Suzuki, who went 13th overall, Eric Branson went 15th, but Nick Suzuki, he was drafted in the first round, and he only played 1 game in the Golden Knights organization. As Nick Suzuki only played 1 game in the AHL for the Chicago Wolves, and that was during the Calder Cup playoffs. Now, Nick Suzuki only spent 1 season, okay? 1 season under the Golden Knights umbrella. However, I want you to hear how insane this is. Nick Suzuki, in 2017-2018, playing for the Owen Sound Attack of the Ontario Hockey League. He played in 64 games that year. He had 42 goals, 58 assists, for a whopping 100 points. I'm going to repeat that again for the people in the back. Nick Suzuki, in his 1 season playing junior hockey while the Golden Knights had him in their system, scored 100 points in the OHL. And then in 2017-2018, during the OHL playoffs, this was the same Owen Sound Attack that actually went on and played in the second round that year. But Nick Suzuki would have 12 points in 11 playoff games. So just think about that. He had 112 points in 75 games in his one and only season under the Golden Knights umbrella. So let me get this straight. This guy just scored 112 points, and you give him away. I mean, would you do that? If there was somebody who had 112 points in 1 season in juniors, would you trade him away? Would you really? Come on now. But what would happen to Nick Suzuki once he landed in Montreal? How would he perform? because in 2018-2019, he only played in the OHL. He didn't even move over to pro hockey yet. Well, in 2018-2019, he would play with the Sound Attack for the first 30 games of the season and had 22 goals and 45 points in just 30 games. He almost averaged a goal per game in his final season playing for the Owen Sound Attack. And then he would go to the OHL playoffs that year, and he would do something magical. He would do something that is insane to think about. In 2018-2019, his team would go all the way to the OHL finals. They would win the OHL finals. And Nick Suzuki in 24 playoff games. I want you to listen to this. In 24 playoff games in 2018-2019, Nick Suzuki had 16 goals, 26 assists for 42 points. Nick Suzuki in the OHL would be named to the Wayne Gretzky Award, which goes to the most valuable player in the OHL playoffs. This is also the same Nick Suzuki that would earn himself a championship and would be a J. Ross Robertson Cup winner in 2019. And to make this even worse, he was a 3-time William Hanley Trophy winner for the most sportsmanlike player in the OHL. And to make this even better, he would actually earn the CHL's George Parsons Trophy in 2019. So Nick Suzuki's final season playing in the OHL, he won his team a championship. He got them to the Memorial Cup in 2019. So Nick Suzuki, off the bat, his first season in Montreal, had an epic performance. Now, how would he do when he got to Montreal? Well, his first season playing in Montreal, 81 games that year, only 17 goals and 48 points. Now, for a first season, that is not bad. He also would go to the playoffs that year, and the Montreal Canadiens would only play 10 games. He would score 4 goals and 7 points in his first playoff action. Now, in 2020-2021, Nick Suzuki would come into his own as he would play in all 56 games, have 15 goals and 41 points. However, his playoff performance is what matters. And I kept this towards the end for a reason. The Montreal Canadiens in the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs, they did something magical. They did something impressive in 2021. The Montreal Canadiens, they would go on to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in the first round. Then they would sweep the Winnipeg Jets in the second round. And then in the Western Conference Finals, the Montreal Canadiens would face your Vegas Golden Knights. That's right. The Montreal Canadiens with Nick Suzuki and with Thomas Tatar would face Max Pacioretty and the Vegas Golden Knights. And the Montreal Canadiens would beat the Golden Knights in 6 games, and Nick Suzuki would lead his Montreal Canadiens to a Stanley Cup Finals appearance. And in 22 playoff games, he would have 7 goals and 16 points in Montreal. Now, that does sound good, right? That sounds very good for the Montreal Canadiens. The fact that this is a Nick Suzuki that led them to get to the Stanley Cup Finals. But we're not done. Towards the beginning of the next season, the Montreal Canadiens would name Nick Suzuki the captain of the Montreal Canadiens. And to make it even worse for Vegas Golden Knights fans, Nick Suzuki has been named an All-Star in 2022, 2023, and 2024. As Nick Suzuki, the past 3 seasons, has had 61 points, 66 points, and 77 points. This is also the same Nick Suzuki who has not missed a single game in 5 years. He has not missed a single game. He has an Iron Man streak right now. 5 years straight, not missing a single game. And in over 370 games, he has 108 goals and 286 points. Max Pacioretty had 97 goals, Suzuki 108. Pacioretty 194 points, Suzuki 286. So this is looking back at the worst trade in Vegas Golden Knights history. So in the long run, he was not worth trading away. A 3-time All-Star in Nick Suzuki. And he is one of the hottest names, as he is a 3-time All-Star and captain of the Montreal Canadiens. This is the Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. And until next time, continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go!